Good morning, everybody. It's Denise with Lazy K Homestead. I just want to thank you for subscribing and watching my channel, taking the time to see what's up on our homestead. We really appreciate it. And this morning, I'm up early and I'm going to feed my sourdough starter. And it's just one of the many breads I make, but we really love the sourdough. I'm originally from California, and I believe that's where it kind of got its origins. And my dad always loved sourdough, and we always had sourdough bread, even though we grew up in Virginia. It was just a real treat for us. But anyways, I do have a video. It's a lot of short videos way back when I first started last year on how to make a sourdough starter. This sourdough starter right here is over 3 years old, and my aunt had one who, let's see, hers was in 1970, hers was 50 years old, and it had been passed down. And that is something you can do with sourdough starter if you've got someone in the family that really wants to carry on that tradition. So hopefully we will. I have given Kelly some of this starter when I first started this starter. And I don't know if she still has it or not, but hopefully she does. And you do need to feed it periodically. Some people say once a week. I go probably a month, and I've got 2 of them in my fridge. So anyways, let me get started on what you need. You're going to need clean glass ball jar. I like to use the wide mouth because they're easier to mix and get things in there. You need a kitchen scale, and you need to set it on grams. And I think that is the most accurate way to measure what you need. And you need flour and water. That's it. Distilled water or purified water. I don't recommend using tap water unless it's from a well, because the water that we get from, we have city water, even though we live in the country, does have chemicals in it to purify that. And you can smell the chlorine, and it will actually kill the yeast in your starter. So I don't recommend using that, and I always use this distilled or purified drinking water here that does not have chemicals in it. Okay, and then you're going to need flour. Now, when I started this starter 3 years ago, I did use whole wheat, and that was fine. You can use rye. A lot of people recommend those. I just go ahead and use my bread flour. You can use all purpose. You don't want to use self-rising. You want to use a plain flour without any of the leavening agents in it, because that's what you're creating here, is a leavening agent. So let's get started. Let me go ahead and put this tripod down a little so you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so it's 151 is the number you want to remember, because that's what the amount of grams you're going to use for flour and water separately. So what I do is I pour my water in first, and I'm going to pour it straight in this jar in up to 151. If you go over a little bit with the water, that's okay. I actually went to 153, which is fine. Now I'm going to go ahead and take it off, and I'm just going to stir it up a little bit just to get your starter in that water. Because once you get the flour in there, it's a little bit thicker to try to stir up all together. That's just experience speaking. So, all right, we'll put it back on here. And I'm going to put in my funnel here because it's a lot easier. And I'm going to put it back on tare, and we're back to 0. Okay, remember, 151. And we are going to go ahead and put our flour in till it is 151 grams. Okay, that was just about a cup. There you go, exactly 151. Okay, that's it. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my scale, and I'm going to mix this up. Whoops. Wrong lid. It's early. Okay, and you're just going to go ahead and mix this around in here until it's smooth. You may not be able to get all the lumps out, but do your very best to try to get them out, because you want that water, starter, and the new flour to be smooth, because this is going to rise. You're just going to set, I set mine on the stove. You can set it anywhere in kind of a warm location. My stove is not on, but I do set it on there because I keep that stove light on. And this is going to go ahead and it will rise once it's fed, and you'll see big old bubbles in it, and I'll show you that. It'll probably take a couple hours, but when it comes to that point, I will put my sourdough bread together, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, and I just lightly put on this lid. It's the one I keep on it in the fridge too. The reason I have just a little air pocket there, you can put a piece of cloth over too. It's whatever you want to do. I don't, because the starter is going to rise all the way up here, probably way over this, and it will get on the cloth, and I'll have to wash it. But anyways, I leave this air pocket here because in our air we have natural yeast all over in our air, and that's what this starter is wanting to grab, is the natural yeast that's in the air, and it will make it rise. It's really the coolest thing. You know, and back in the day when people couldn't get yeast, they used starter like this. So we'll be back as soon as it's ready and show you what it's all about. It's really exciting. Okay, we are finally back. The starter is ready for us to use in the recipe, and let me just get that so I can show you what I'm talking about. Here it is on the stove, and you can see how much it has risen. It's right here, and if you can look in there, you'll see lots of bubbles, and it is ready to be used. So I'm going to set that aside just for a minute. We've got a few more things we need to do first, and I'm going to go ahead and put my tripod down so you can see what we're doing here. There we go. First thing we're going to do is I've warmed up 1 cup of milk. I'm going to go ahead and put it right back in the measuring cup. And I don't have a microwave, and this is right at 140, so that's about pretty good. It's kind of where if you had a baby bottle and you put it on your wrist, what you would, that temperature. So between 140, 135 and 140. Okay, and so what I'm going to do to add to this is my 1 package of active dry yeast, and this is Fleshman's. Make sure before you do use your yeast that it is in date, and you'll find that date right there. And this is June 26, 2023, so I'm good with that. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and mix that yeast up in there, and then to this I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of honey. And yeast likes sugar or honey because it grows really fast with that sweetness, that natural sweetness. And I do use sugar or honey in this. I don't use any artificial sweeteners. Okay. Now we're just going to go ahead and stir that around just a bit. And I'm going to let that go ahead and bloom, and then we'll be back. Okay guys, this is a perfect bloom right here. See how nice and fluffy that is? That's called the blooming of the yeast. Okay, with this recipe, I'm going to have the complete recipe in the description, but I'm using bread flour, white lily, and I'm going to put 1 cup in my bread bowl, and then I'm going to add to that 2 tablespoons of softened butter. I have used oil in here before. I've used Crisco too if I was out of butter. And you just pour this warm milk and yeast and honey over that butter, and it will melt it. Getting all that goodness out of there. Okay. And this is a a dough hook or a dough whisk. And I got that for Christmas. I had asked for it. I was really excited about it. I didn't know if I was actually going to get one for Christmas, but I had asked for one. Everybody's always wanting to know what you want for Christmas, and I'm like, any kitchen gadget I will take. All right. Now, to this we're going to add 2 cups of the starter. And you can see in there. Let's see if I can see how nice that looks. And 2 full cups of this starter, which is just about all of this. You'll have a little bit left. You always want to make sure you leave some of your starter, because if you don't, that'll be the end of your starter, and you'll actually have to start all over again with making starter, and it is a 9-day process. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mix that in here. You need at least a half a cup of starter left in your jar. And you can just pop that in the fridge. It's already fed. It's not going to be hungry for a while. And in a couple weeks, you can look in there and see if that hooch is on there. Then you can go ahead and feed it, and it'll be ready. And you don't have to make bread when you're feeding your starter, but it's best to do that, because then you don't have all this leftover starter, because it's always going to increase. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is put another cup of flour in. This takes about 3 3/4 cups altogether. There's 2, so that's 3 altogether. Okay, now I'm going to add my salt now, and I never add my salt to my starter yeast mixture because salt will kill it. I have found that with experience. I've read so many recipes like, oh no, just add it. No, you can't. It will actually kill it. And this is 2.5 teaspoons of salt. I just use regular salt, table salt. Okay. All right. Now at this point, I want to add about 3/4 cup of flour to this. Go ahead and move some of the stuff off of here. Alrighty. And we are going to go ahead and continue to mix this in. This, when you add the last of your flour, adding the last of your flour, it's going to seem like it's never going to mix in. And you might have a little bit of flour left in the bottom of your bowl, but that's fine. This recipe makes 2 loaves of bread. Okay, so there we go. We've got that. And I'm just going to go ahead and start kneading it inside the bowl, because that will pick up some of that extra flour. This is also the bowl that I'm going to use to have it rise in too. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and put some flour on this island here. Put this out here. I'm going to go ahead and throw any of that away. That little pieces of dough. Okay. So what I'm going to do to this is make a little well in the middle of my dough before I start the 8 minutes of kneading. And you do need to knead it for 8 minutes. Very important. And while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and add just about, I don't know, a couple tablespoons. This is olive oil. You can use vegetable oil, Crisco, as long as it's liquid. And you just want to kind of roll it around in there, because when you're going to put your dough in here, you want to make sure that it's nice and oiled. All right, let me set that back over here until I'm ready for it. All right, so we've got the oil right here. And what that does, it also puts fat in here. And it'll make your dough really nice and a nutty flavor. And I've been doing that for a long time. Okay, So I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 8 minutes. And I will be back and show you the finished product that we are going to put in our bowl to rise. Be back in a minute. Okay, here's after 8 minutes of kneading. You have it in a ball. And you're going to go ahead and just twirl it around in your oiled bowl and then twirl it around again. And then the whole thing is covered with oil. And then what I do is I cover this loosely with some plastic wrap or cellophane, whatever you want to call it, like so. Okay. And then you just go ahead and you lightly put on a tea towel. This is a old flour sack tea towel. Okay, and this is going to rise to double its size, or about an hour and a half, and we'll be back. Okay, about 2 hours later, and let me go ahead and put this tripod down so you can see. Hold on 1 second there. And we've got our bread that is doubled in size. And what we're going to do now is just punch it down because you want to release the gases. And I'm just going to turn it out on the table there. And I'm going to let it rest for about 15 minutes. And then we will put it in our loaf pans. And we'll let it rise for another about an hour. And then we will bake it. So we'll be back in just a minute. Okay, we're back after 15 minutes of letting the dough rest, and we're going to cut it in half. I'm going to put one aside, and then we're just going to work with one. And I just go, now you can either roll this out with a rolling pin, or just go ahead and kind of flatten it out like I'm doing right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can get that in the video better. Yeah. There we go. Then I'm just going to pinch it. Okay. And this is a oiled pan. I'm just going to go ahead and put that in there. And then we'll work on that second one. I have found that if the less that I work with this dough, the better off it is rising. So I just kind of made it in the middle there, and again, and just pinch it. There you go. All right, and we're just going to go ahead and put it in that second one. And then I just kind of just flatten them out a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put plastic over these, just lightly, just to keep the heat in. And then I'll put my flour sack over it again, and we'll let this rise till it's for about an hour and a half, possibly an hour. It depends. I usually like it to get a little bit above the loaf pan, and then we'll bake it. Okay, we've got our second rise here, and it's risen nicely. I've got my oven preheated at 375, and I'm going to go ahead and put these in the oven and bake it for 20 minutes. And the next video, part of this video, will be this baked bread. See you in a minute. Okay, here we are 20 minutes later, and we have this wonderful bread. Look at that. Oh, this is just such a great bread. It's a little bit hot right now. I'm going to let it cool, and in the morning I will have this for toast. So I'll see you then. Thank you for sharing your time with us, and like, share, and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.